Sit back and listen to this extremely interesting story.
This is a fictional story, and any fictitious communication is between fictitious consenting adults. The moments of happiness we enjoy take us by surprise. It is not that we seize them, but that they seize us. Ashley Montagu. It had been over 25 years since I'd been in my hometown. 26 years, 5 months, and 12 days to be exact. I'd left town a broken man at the ripe old age of 26. It was the day after I discovered my wife of 3 years was pregnant with her first child. Hers and her boss's, to be more precise. When she told me she was pregnant, I knew immediately it wasn't mine, not that she tried all that hard to hide it. We were young and broke. The economy was tough, so I'd taken a short-term job on a river barge that worked up and down the Mississippi. It was great money for a young man, but it required I be gone for 6 to 8 weeks. It turned out to be 9. We both decided it was worth the separation since I'd make more in those 2 months than I'd made in 4 at my previous job. We were young and in love. We could manage. My wife managed to do this about 2 weeks before she started spending time with her boss, David Hollister. He owned an insurance firm, and she was one of 3 administrative assistants. As it turned out, she was the 3rd person he was friends with. He was also very well connected in our small town, so even when she ran into him, he just smiled. "What are you going to do, Debbie? Try to ruin me? Take me to court? I'm not married. The local judge is my brother-in-law, and you don't have 2 nickels to hire a lawyer." He gave her $1,000 severance when he fired her the next day. By the time I got back to town 2 weeks later, she was working the breakfast and lunch shift as a server at a local diner. When she told me the story, she was so remorseful it was pathetic. She apologized for 15 minutes and then insisted that we use my newfound fortune of $12,500 to sue the bastard. "Tom, we can fix it. It didn't mean anything. I was just lonely, blah, blah, blah." She spoke while I stood there silent and stoic. She admitted that it meant nothing, implying that she had spent time with him about 24 times in my absence. I think she was genuinely shocked when she shut up, and I laughed bitterly in her face. Turning away, I spent the next hour silently doing a couple of loads of laundry, then packed my bags and left for good. Cell phones were a luxury in the late 90s, so she had no real way to track me. I never saw or heard from her again. Yes, I was angry and hurt. Humiliated and broken, I wanted to find a way to get revenge on them both, but as a young man with very little experience, I couldn't know how or what to do. My relatives both died. I had a sister in Chicago, so no connections kept me in beautiful Hannibal, Missouri. I took another gig on a barge, bought a used Ford F-150 pickup, and headed west. Over the next 2 decades, I made my way. I ended up working as a bookkeeper for a small title company in Denver for 3 years, during which time I earned a degree in finance. Being single, or at least living single, I had plenty of time to study and take classes, so I knocked out the degree in just over 2 years. I had no idea if or when Debbie would divorce me. I'm sure she did, but I never found out. With some letters behind my name and a few bucks in my pocket, I kept moving west, this time settling in Bend, Oregon. I didn't know anybody there, but had done some research, and it looked like a great place to reboot. Golf and mountain biking in the summer, skiing in the winters were perfect for me. I was also convinced there wasn't a serious migration from Hannibal to Bend, so I could truly begin my life over. I set up shop as a small investment broker, and after 10 years, I had 3 junior partners and a couple of admin support staff. I was bringing in almost $200K per year, and my world was moving along just fine. I made good friends and dated as often as I felt like it. Having the experience with betraying Debbie still in recesses of my mind, I didn't ever consider marriage. I never told my full story when colleagues asked why I wasn't interested in a wife and kids. I just shrug and say something like, "Not for me." Over the years, I did think about Deb from time to time. It was impossible not to. We dated for 2 years and been married for 3. Most of those 5 years, I thought I was with the woman with whom I'd spend the rest of my life. It was more than a jolt to my system when I found out she'd cucked me with her boss and was carrying his bastard child. I didn't want those painful memories making me bitter, so I worked every day on focusing on the best of the world and doing all I could to be a good and generous person with those around me. So, despite doing well for myself and leaving the past in the past, I now find myself on a Delta flight from Portland to St. Louis and then a puddle jumper to Hannibal. Why? Well, as it turns out, I have a long-lost uncle on my mom's side who died and left me a very small estate. Somehow his attorney tracked me down in Bend. We discussed it over the phone, and while I was inclined to just let him handle everything remotely, I decided why not go back to the old homestead one last time. So at 51 years of age, and a completely different person, I embarked on my trip down memory lane. I am still a bit of a penny pincher, but since I was about to inherit around $40,000, I decided to fly first class. As I settled in, I found myself seated next to a delightful young woman who looked to be in her mid-20s. Her name was Tabitha, and she had been visiting some friends in Bend. The trip was a 25th birthday present from her mom. By the time we were over Nebraska, we were talking like old friends. Her mom was single when she was born, but married when she was about 2 years old to a local high school teacher. Unfortunately, he molested a couple of underage co-eds and ended up not just fired, but in jail. When she was 12, her mom married again, this time to a local businessman. They lived in a nice house all the way through high school until she went off to school at Missouri State. It was her junior year when her mom caught hubby Mike with his secretary, and that brought an end to marriage number 2. At that point, her mom decided to stay single. As we drank wine and chatted, she explained that she had an accounting degree and was working in St. Louis. She saw her mother at least one weekend a month. It was clear that she loved her mother, but also thought that she was not very smart. Obviously, she didn't know men well, and her relationships didn't help Tabitha learn how to maintain a loving and stable relationship. As we talked, I thought there was something in her eyes that intrigued me, but I couldn't figure it out, so I just let it go. She asked me a few questions about my background, and I gave her the full story except for my early marriage and breakup. I just never wanted to talk about that with anyone, much less a young woman about half my age I just met on a flight. She seemed content with what I shared and didn't pry too much. By the time we were closing in on Kansas City and the last hour of the flight, I also figured out young Tabitha had some daddy issues. We'd only had a couple glasses of wine, but she was leaning into me as we talked more than was appropriate, and it was clear she was flirting. When she asked about no wedding ring, it was with a look that was asking if I might be interested. In all honesty, I loved a young woman coming on to me. I'm fit and trim and reasonably sociable, but nobody in their 20s would be interested in a guy old enough to be their father. Right as Tabitha openly touched my arm, she mentioned that she still had a few days before returning to work. She wondered if I would like company on my journey to Hannibal. She could surprise her mother and visit her, taking the time to show me how the old hometown has changed. In her proposal, there was a clear mood for close communication. One of my favorite sayings is, "I may be ugly, but I'm not stupid." When we landed, I bought Tabitha a one-way ticket from St. Louis to Hannibal. The flight was not full, so I found a seat next to her. There are no first-class seats on this small plane, but the flight was only 40 minutes long. When the plane took off, they dimmed the lights in the cabin. Traveling from west to east, you travel at night, so when we took off, it was late evening and dark. It was at this moment that Tabitha reached out and kissed me. It was nice. She also allowed herself to please me. Tabitha smiled and purred softly in my ear. "Oh, Dad has a serious problem that he needs help with. I'll take good care of you when we land." I was lucky to hold back. I took her hand in mine and whispered, "If you misbehave, I will have to punish you when we get home, young lady." I felt the heat coming off her as she whispered back, "I hope so." We landed 20 minutes later, although it felt like an eternity to me. I rented a very nice VRBO overlooking the Mississippi not far from town. It was too late to call her mom, and neither of us was in the mood to part ways. Tabitha stayed overnight at my house and talked to her mom while I was with the lawyer. We both agreed that meeting her mother was not a priority. Tabitha didn't think her mom would be at all freaked out by seeing her daughter decide to have a quick chat with a much older man. We hadn't been in the rented room for a minute when we started talking. She was perfect. It was late spring, so none of us were carrying anything heavy. Therefore, it was not difficult to get rid of part of her clothes. She broke the kiss and demanded that I give her time to take a shower. We would be traveling for the better part of 7 hours, so I agreed it was a good idea. I offered to rub her back, but she gave her an evil grin and told me to be patient while she got ready to make Daddy happy. I asked myself, who was this young vixen, and could I survive the night's intercourse with her? I let her visit the bathroom in the master suite as it had a deep soaking tub. I grabbed a shower in the spare bedroom, and it took all the discipline I could muster not to release the tension myself. I was successful, and within a couple of minutes I was lying in the big bed waiting for my baby girl to join me. Tabitha did not disappoint. She leaned against the door frame and Spoke in her best little girl voice. Daddy, I was very, very naughty in the tub. What did you do, baby girl? I played without asking your permission. Did you enjoy yourself, my little naughty girl? No, Dad, but I was so close thinking about Dad. I thought my head was going to explode and my body was going to burst into flames. I sat down, threw my legs over the edge, and placed them on the floor. Well, that is very naughty, Tabitha. What should Daddy do with you? She started walking towards me, swaying as she spoke. Bad girls need to be taught, Dad. She replied, sitting on my lap. He began to punish her. Oh, Daddy, I'm so sorry for being a teasing girl. Please, Daddy, let me be a good girl and make it up to you. How are you going to make it up to me, girl? You need to be put in your place. I growled, barely holding back from rushing the game. Please, Daddy, she said as I transitioned from punishment to more pleasurable methods. Let me make you happy. I'll make it so good. I promise, Daddy, I'll be such a good girl for you. As she said this, she felt my grip loosen and she did as promised. She was doing it so well that it took me about 2 minutes to be satisfied. As she continued, I thought I was about to die the happiest 51-year-old man on the planet. For the next 2 hours we spent time together as if it were our last 2 hours on Earth. We took a break in the water and then continued over the kitchen counter. She pushed me onto the couch and sat on top of me. We spent time both in the shower and in the jacuzzi. By the time we were done, we must have been two of the most well-fed people on the planet. As I drifted off to sleep with Tabitha in my arms, I knew she probably needed to work out her daddy issues, but like I said before, ugly and dumb are not the same thing. I had hoped that this wonderful young woman would have a wonderful life, but now I was extremely happy. I was glad I gave as good as I got. When we woke up, we spent some time in the shower before getting dressed and going to breakfast. It was Saturday and she knew her mom wouldn't be at work, so she decided to call her after breakfast. Eric Hodges, the attorney representing my uncle's estate, agreed to meet with me at 10 a.m. on a Saturday, as our case would only last about an hour and he was being paid $5,000 by the estate to close it. Tabitha and I agreed we'd meet later for drinks and dinner. She'd let her mom know she was going to see a guy but not give her any indication of our situation. She told me the restaurant where we could meet and suggested I try to make a reservation since it would be crowded. We would then retreat back to the house for the night, and in the morning I'd head back to the airport and she'd continue visiting her mom. I told her I'd buy her a ticket back to St. Louis, but she thought her mom would want to take Monday off and drive her home. We had a plan. As we left, Tabitha reached up and gave me a sweet kiss on the lips. I can't wait to see you tonight, Daddy. She whispered. Damn, I thought. It was good this was only for a weekend, otherwise I might never get back to Bend. I used my direction app to find Hodges' office. It was in the middle of a shopping/restaurant area of downtown. I found a parking spot right around the corner and entered his office at 10 a.m. sharp. He was waiting for me, all smiles and handshakes. We chatted for a few brief minutes about life. I told him I'd lived here many years ago when he inquired about my family history. I didn't go into any of the details about my past beyond what was necessary. When we got down to business, it was relatively simple. My uncles will allow us to avoid probate. Hodges took my driver's license and made several copies for his filing and records. He then read the will aloud. As we wrapped up our business, he handed me a money order for $40,765.00. After one or two final pleasantries, I was out the door and headed back to my car. As I rounded the corner, I looked up, and a block away I saw Tabitha with an older woman who must have been her mother. They were talking and giggling, not paying attention to anyone around them, so they hadn't spotted me yet. I froze. I was looking at my ex-wife, Debbie. I hadn't seen her in 25 years, and she looked older, but I would have known her anywhere. It suddenly dawned on me why Tabitha's eyes caught my attention. They looked like her mother's. They crossed the street about half a block away, still oblivious to my presence, and entered a dress boutique. I spent time with my ex-wife's daughter. All the emotions of those years flooded back. I stepped out in a cold sweat, and my hands were shaking. The one who betrayed my deepest love, who deprived me of the joy of a life together with a true partner, was in the dress shop across the street, completely unaware of my presence. The pain was intense. Then suddenly I started laughing softly. I thought about all the times I'd struggled with how to get revenge on her. A year after landing in Bend, I decided to call it quits. I knew I would never have a chance to balance the scales. Whatever happened to my ex-wife would have happened without me. I wasn't going to let her betrayal completely destroy me. Maybe I'm too scared, but I'd be fine even if I had to give up any idea of getting even. The more I thought about this, the more I laughed. The few people on the street were probably wondering what was so fucking funny. As I leaned on my car, catching my breath, still chuckling, I realized that my laugh wasn't one of relief, it was sinister. It dawned on me that I wasn't going to be chivalrous or kind to Debbie. I wasn't going to let sleeping dogs lie. I was going to enjoy this moment for what it was. Perhaps a more mature man would have reacted differently. A genuinely nice guy would probably figure enough water was under the bridge and let bygones be bygones, not me. I realized I wanted a bit of payback, and this was my moment. I didn't want to hurt Tabitha in the process, but that may not be able to be avoided. I would try not to be cruel to her. She couldn't help to whom she had been born. However, I was going to enjoy inflicting some small pain on my ex. I crossed the street and waited about 4 doors down from the dress shop. When they reappeared, I strode toward them. The next 5 minutes would never make it into a Hallmark movie, but oh my goodness, was it fun. Tabitha, hey Tabitha, I called, waving. I saw her look up a bit confused. We'd agreed I didn't need to meet her mom. Her expression was a mix of surprise and mild anxiousness. At first, Debbie looked at me the way anyone would look at a stranger who was clearly a friend of their daughter. As I closed the gap smiling, Debbie's eyes went from curiosity to confusion to recognition and shock all in about 10 seconds. Her hand flew to her mouth as she exclaimed, "Oh my, Tom," and now it was Tabitha's turn to be confused. "Mom, do you know this man?" Before she could interject, I spoke up, "Hello, Debbie, it's been a long time." "Oh, that felt so good. Tom, what are you doing here? I mean, why are you here, and how do you know my daughter?" "Mom, do you know Tom? Tom, do you know my mom? How is that possible? What's going on?" They were both confused. "Well, ladies, let me try and explain. Tabitha, I'll begin with you. I had no idea until 5 minutes ago my cheating, lying ex-wife was your mom. We didn't discuss it on the plane last night, but I was married here many, many years ago. Debbie, please stop me if you want to add anything." "No." "Okay, I'll continue. You see, Tabitha, your mom was my first and only true love. We were young and broke, but we were in love. Trying to make ends meet, I took a job on a river barge and was gone for about 9 weeks. We both agreed before I left it would be hard, but we were in love and we could make it. Every day on that barge for over 2 months, all I thought about was my Debbie and getting back to her. I was so excited when I got my paycheck and headed home. We could truly begin our life together. Imagine my surprise when my loving, caring wife, who had pledged her faithfulness to me, told me she was pregnant by someone else. As we talked, I realized she only waited 2 weeks before spending time with her boss, your dad, David Hollister. At the same time, both women gasped. "Oh, I..." Continued, "Debbie, you never told your daughter about her real father. Well, that's a shame. Maybe that's why she has daddy issues, which are bound to show up when she's talking to a man. I thought Debbie was going to pass out. Anyway, girl, your mom destroyed me and our future in a matter of weeks by spending time with her boss. He ended up giving her $1,000,000 to go away and keep her mouth shut. I left town emotionally bankrupt, and it took me the better part of 5 years to land on my feet and begin rebuilding my life. So that should answer your question. Now, Debbie, on to your questions. I came back to town because I had an uncle I never knew who died and left me a small inheritance. I decided to go back and see my hometown one last time, closing my case with attorney Eric Hodges. I had no idea you still lived here and wasn't going to look for you. Why should I reunite with a selfish woman who didn't care about me or my love? Anyway, on the plane I was seated next to a beautiful young woman who told me her name was Tabitha. We chatted over a few glasses of wine and enjoyed getting to know each other. She never told me your name, and I never had any inkling as to her true identity. However, as I said, we had a great time and really enjoyed each other. Again, I think that may be partially because she's still looking for a loving daddy. So we flew to Hannibal last night, and she joined me for the night. I mean, it was really epic. I never remember you talking to me with such brilliance and enthusiasm. I don't know how many times we did it, but there must have been at least 8 of them. I don't know how much pleasure Tabitha had. But I did my best, and even in my old age, I'm sure I gave her more than a dozen. I also think you'll be very proud to know that I've never been made so nice as she has made me. If you're wondering, yes, she swallowed the whole thing. Tabitha was crimson red and now obviously angry. Debbie was mortified and tears were streaming down her cheeks. I was almost done. I looked back at Tabitha. Tabitha, I'm sorry you're hurt and angry right now, and I don't blame you. But you have no idea what real pain is. It turns out that I betrayed you a little. I could have seen your mother, turned and walked away. But I'm just not that good of a guy, and a lot of it is down to this woman you call Mom. Just know that I'll never speak of this again, and I hold no animosity toward you. I hope you have a good life, and if you ever find yourself in Bend needing a friend, I will be there for you. No strings attached. You are a fine young woman, and I'm sorry you were caught up in this. I'm guessing it is a firm no, but I'd still enjoy having dinner with you this evening without the expectation of anything physical. Tabitha's face softened just a bit. Debbie, your tears and pain are healing for me. I assumed I would never get the chance to show you how much you hurt me. I could never in a million years come up with such a plan, but now that I'm here, I want you to know that I see the terror in your eyes. Now you have some understanding of what you have done to me. I can see it on your face, and I know it hurts. Your little girl is a wonderful young woman. I hope the image of me repeatedly doing her good last night will stay in your head for the rest of your days. Goodbye. I turned and walked away, feeling the weight of the world falling off my shoulders as I heard Debbie sobbing in the background. Later that day, my phone rang. Daddy, are you still going to meet me for dinner? I yelled at my mother, very naughty, and I need to be punished.
Subscribe to our channel so that your second C gaff doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think about listening to the next one.